The first team of this session is Troubleshooter. They will talk about safety suggestions on floating armories. Team Troubleshooter, please go to the stage. Welcome, please.
안녕하세요. 팀 트러블슈터입니다. 저희는 해상무기고 안전규정 제안이라는 주제로 본 대회에 참여하고 계셨는데요. 제 팀원들을 한번 소개하는 시간을 갖도록 하겠습니다.
네, 안녕하십니까. 트러블슈터입니다. 한국어로는 해결사라고 하는데요. 우리가 왜 해결사라고 했냐면 세상에 산적해 있는 많은 문제들을 해결하는데 조금이라도 도움이 되고자 해결사라고 지었습니다. 열심히 한번 해보겠습니다.
아자!
화이팅!
네, 이상이었습니다. 그럼 안녕.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here with us for today. And it's an honor to speak in front of people now. This is Team Troubleshooter, and I'm speaker 1. The subject of our presentation is proposal for safety regulation on floating armory. Perhaps this topic is far cry from our lives, and most of us have never thought it very closely. However, it is clear that this problem is causing political and security issues at the sea, and also is threatening the lives of many. Furthermore, it is directly deteriorating facilitation of global trade. For this reason, we chose this issue as the topic of our presentations. Our team is going to talk about following things: the concept of FAs, floating armories, current status, problems of FAs, safety suggestion on FAs, and obviously, lastly, the conclusion. So, what the floating armories are? So the name suggests that floating armories are a floating ship or arsenal on the sea. Floating armories are usually converted from the vessels or ships built for other purposes, including tugs or cargo ships and survey crafts. Their primary function or purpose is to provide offshore storage facilities for weapons used by anti-piracy guards protecting vessels traversing the part of Indian Ocean which is known for High Risk Area, HRA. In other words, floating armories provide service which is commercially used to store related equipment such as small weapons, ammunition, bulletproof clothing, or combat gears. Before we go to the second slide, I would like to ask you questions. Are FAs vessels or not? If the FAs are not ships or vessels, there is no need for IMO to control for them. However, according to United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, and also several studies, it is a vessel. While it may seem obvious, floating armories are, first and foremost, it's a vessel. So how many FAs in our world? Does anyone know that? Unfortunately, we do not know that too. United Nations estimate that there are 13 companies in HRA own 18 floating armories. But European Union naval forces estimate that there are 20 floating armories in HRA. On the other hand, the government of United Kingdom estimate that there are 31 FAs. Since this estimation, the number of floating armory is much more significant than we anticipated, meaning the estimation is unclear. Look at the list. This is the list of the known floating armories. However, as you can see here, some of the information about vessels in this list is missing. To put it another way, we do not know exact numbers and information about it. This undoubtedly leads over concerns about maritime security. So, why IMO? Why should International Maritime Organization should take an action? As mentioned before, FAs are vessels. Besides this, International Maritime Organizations aims to improve the safety of international shipping, which moves around 80% of the world trade. Furthermore, as you can see, the Strategic Direction 5 is stipulating enhanced global facilitation and security of international trade. The problems of floating armories are posing new challenge to international trade and threatens lives that directly counter the International Maritime Organization's Strategic Direction 5. From now on, my friend Speaker 2 will analyze the problems of floating armories.
Hi everyone, I'm going to take it from here. I hope you all enjoyed all your lunch. It was beautiful. There are some points we want to make regarding the status quo of the floating armories. First of all, no ship has been built for an FA purposes since the design and construction stages. Thus, the floating armories are nothing more than just a makeshift, which bears a tremendous amount of safety risk. Then what are the existing FAs made of? They are converted from mostly patrol ships and tugboats just mentioned before. To that end, it means existing floating armories may not be suitable for its intended purposes, since it may not have the suitable space for small arms and weapons inside. The countries that grant permission to the floating armories also fly the flag of convenience, which means these countries are likely to have the lowest safety standards. Given the age of existing FAs, that are at least 30 years old each, these vessels are in need of supervision in terms of safety. Ambiguous vessel classification, the IACS, the International Association of Classification Societies, does not define the floating armories at all. But just like mentioned before, these FAs are former tugboats, fishing vessels, and cargo ships and passenger vessels. Floating armories keep the same IMO identification number even after they are modified into the armories. This clouds our vigilance on the supervision of an IMO. This is the list of floating armories confirmed by SCEG Group, the Security in Complex Environment Group, and the list says their IMO numbers stay exactly the same without a clear explanation of its nature. As you can see below, 1 cargo ship, 2 special purposes vehicles, 1 passenger, and 8 unspecified. And next is low traceability. Furthermore, it is absolutely unlikely for a law enforcement agency to have an up-to-date data on floating armories, since there is no such designation or definition of floating armories after all. All the weapons and small arms inside, we have no idea where they are, where they're going. This leads to a significant chance of being misused for terrorist purposes. This unchained risk has to be dealt with. So, what happens when the floating armory gets hijacked? We don't have any clear protocol or operation procedure, as mentioned before,
there is no basic anti-hijack standards for FAs because there's no such definition or official recognition on floating armories at all. For instance, there was a case in which the Ukrainian PCASP, who is an operator, hijacked a floating armory for his belated payment. This happened on August 20th, 2020, this year, on Red Sea, on the floating armory named Sultan this year, and her crews taken hostage. It took only one rogue operator to hijack the entire armory full of weapons and ammunition. This, we believe, this could have been another 9/11 terror. Thus, we believe this agenda, our agenda, requires immediate attention of IMO as soon as possible before it turns into another nightmare for all. Based on what I just said, we can easily think, why not just create the definition and designate floating armories? Well, it's not as simple as you think. Creating the safety codes for floating armories and floating armories only does not solve the problem of being misused for terrorist purposes, because they still can be hijacked. Anybody with the internet connection can easily locate the floating armories on the high seas. Given that the floating armories are potential high-value target, their exact location, their coordinates should be kept away from wrong hands. Then what should we do? My next presenter will take it from here.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Speaker Sri, and I would like to suggest two kind of solutions from our team. First one is this. We suggest IMO to create and control database of the floating armory. This database covers all information about the floating armory that are reported to the IMO. However, not everyone have access to this database. Related authorities are the only one have access to this database by cooperating with the IMO. Therefore, we believe this database could provide information of floating armory to related authorities and also can prevent giving the sensitive information to wrong hands. And lastly, we believe this could promote further discussion about floating armory vessels and its security threats. Oh, sorry about that. So now I would like to introduce the mechanism of the database system. When piracy attack actually happens to floating armory, the fact that there has been piracy activity would be reported to the IMO and other authorities, but other authorities cannot know whether this vessel is FA or not. But with our confidential database system, IMO would know purpose of this vessel is floating armory, and it could give this information to other authorities. Therefore, these authorities could react more efficiently since they already knows this vessel is FA. So basically, this is how it works. Our second suggestion is revising MSC 1 Circular Letter 1334. Under the provision 11 of MSC 1 Circular 1334, it says, it is therefore recommended that in the event of an occurrence, masters should report all actual or attempted attacks of piracy and armed robbery or threats. What we are suggesting is to turn this sanction recommendation into responsibility. This means that we can prevent underreporting of floating armory security problems. Also, with our database system, authorities would be able to verify if the vessel is actually floating armory. So we believe combination of our two systems would be able to prevent underreporting of security threats against floating armory. So, in the conclusion, it is certain that floating armory is posing security threats on international maritime trade, and coronavirus is giving devastating damage to the nations in Horns of Africa, affecting governments, power, economies, and counter-piracy operation in the region. Just like in the 2008 subprime economic crisis, we believe this kind of economic disaster would make piracy activity to skyrocket again. And considering terrorism activity is also rising in Europe, just like we saw in Paris and Austria a few days ago, it is important to establish security insurance security insurance policy for floating armory. So we're suggesting system that can prevent this kind of threat. And at the same time, we did our best to take IMO's strategic direction in accordance. Therefore, we believe our suggestion could be a milestone for maritime security. So thank you for listening. I was Speaker 3, and we are troubleshooters.
Thank you very much, Troubleshooter. So if you have any questions, please raise your hands. Yes, from Judge first.
Thank you for your presentation. And I fully agree your suggestion that some need regulation for the floating armory. But recently there are many accidents happened related to the piracy, especially the Western Africa. But actually, the maritime shipping industry, the armed guardian already on board on the merchant vessel. So the place, something like the floating armory, need for their sport. But it could be raised some question on the political issues, and or another aspect that the jurisdiction of the convention. The most IMO convention only control or define the merchant vessel, not naval force. So my question is that the FA, your suggestion can be defined as a naval force or merchant vessels. Thank you.
Could you repeat your question again, because we could not get your point?
Your suggestion on the FA could be defined as categorized as a naval force or merchant vessel. If the FA defined as a naval force, it could not be defined under the IMO auspice.
No, sir. First of all, the floating armory is not related to any Navy or sovereign state. I mean, there could be a floating armory that owned by the Navy, but that means that the IMO doesn't really have any kind of jurisdiction about it. What we're talking about in here is to have some kind of a security policy for the floating armory, which is operated by the private companies, which is designated as a commercial ship. So we understand the Navy's, the IMO doesn't have any relations to the Navy, and we are not trying to have some kind of change against the Navy or a sovereign state. We are just saying that the private military companies are operating this kind of dangerous vessels, and we need some kind of security insurance policy about it. So no, the FA is not a Navy, and we are not trying to have some kind of jurisdiction against the Navy of a sovereign state.
Okay. Next question from Master.
First of all, thank you for the presentation. Our question is that in the problems, you have pointed out that the identification of these floating armories is very difficult. So how do you exactly propose to collect the data for the database?
You are asking us how to collect the data, right?
So in the problems, you said the identification of these floating armories is very difficult. So, and you wanted to create a new database for these floating armories. So how do you propose to collect the data for that?
Yeah, that is really a good question, and thank you for that. And I would like to say that there's some list of FAs that is already we known that, so we can develop that data list for that, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Question?
Yeah, battery, yeah.
I really like the fresh idea you suggested, but let alone the blind spots there may be. I was just curious about the level of secret of the database. I mean, is it gonna be a top secret level of data or just a secret level? And who is gonna control the database according to which regulation?
All right, first of all, the control of the database is obviously by the IMO, and it is shared under, it is shared with the local governments, law enforcement, or any other maritime naval forces in the region. So I'm not going to say it's kind of a top secret level as, I don't know, Area 51 or something. I mean, a lot of people could say it, but the point is, some guy sitting in the mountain of Afghanistan is not going to find out where and what the floating armor is doing. And I believe those kind of security insurance would be enough for now and enough for these circumstances, which there isn't any really effective policy controls the floating armory.
From Josh?
Yeah. In the line with the previous question, I think it is more and more important nowadays. Cyber security issue is more important rather than physical weapons, something. What do you think about the cyber attack protection from this issue?
Ask you a question. What do you mean by cyber attack? Cyber attack for the FAs or
Okay, yeah.
FAs, right?
For example, we are talking about your proposal is talking about physical weapon itself. But as we can see, 9/11, vessel itself can be a weapon toward the port or other vessels. So what do you think about cyber attacks which can be controlled by piracy?
Hello, sir. I'm grateful that you mentioned about the 9/11. We understand the 9/11 is a complex 21st century version of terror. But in the end, even the planes that were hijacked in 9/11 was by man. It was by a person with the ideas and the weapons and equipment that aboard in the plane. And we believe, for these circumstances, there is no way by cyber attacking floating armory and by cyber to collect all the firearms in the floating armory to somewhere else. I mean, there gotta be some kind of physical attack, or there gotta be some kind of operative on the floating armory, or at least outside of the vessel. So we understand in the 21st century, and there could be a lot of ideas of cyber attacking and terrorism attacks. But in the end, this is a vessel. And if there is some kind of magical way to make the floating armory to go somewhere else without the consent of the crews and the captain, then I believe we still, and the most important part that we have to consider is the physical attack of the terrorists.
Okay, thank you. Safe Recyclers.
Okay, thank you for your great presentation. Our question is, you said that there will be the security problems when the IMO code can be browsed by anyone. So you said you wanted to create the database for FAs, which only the related authorities can access. But in this case, if wouldn't it be more safe if the data is open to everyone? So if the only limited authorities can assess the database, wouldn't there be some discrimination or something like that?
Okay. every terrorism attack needs a target. So basically, even some smart gun in Islamabad or Baghdad have some kind of a great idea. Right? Why not we can just hijack a floating armory? I mean, basically, it's a boat with a gun. But if he doesn't know where the location of it, then it's kind of pointless. I mean, the sea is big, and the terrorist doesn't have any kind of radar system like the Navy of a sovereign state. So, yes, letting everyone in the world to see this kind of database is kind of a pointless. I mean, that means we just gotta give terrorists a new, fresh target they can attack. So, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Please return to your seat.